time for The World This Week, 7 days, 4 Paris-based correspondents, 1 hour. And joining us, Ulrike Kollermann, Paris-based journalist, currently working on a book on
French nuclear power.
Thank you for being with us. Thanks as well to Tanguy Salin, who works with the Reuters news agency and whose book is out in French, co-written with a guest of ours who comes often, Claude Guibal, The Egypt of Tahir, Anatomy of a Revolution. When's the English language translation coming out?
I don't know. I don't think there will be any because a lot of journalists wrote books about Egypt. So there is a translation in Arabic, actually.
Okay. Well, there you go. It's a start. It's a start. Okay. Another man who knows a thing about writing books and is Craig Kapitas, author of Mona Lisa's Pajamas. Welcome back, sir. We await Dave Clark of the French news agency AFP, who should be joining us shortly. The World This Week, where you can always weigh in on the conversation on Facebook and join us as well on Twitter. You can find us at FrancoisF24. Was it 19th time lucky? The Paris and Frankfurt stock exchanges soaring more than 4% Friday after yet another EU summit. One this time, though, that lays out some new rules for putting out financial fires in a hurry and broad pledges to seriously reform the way Europe is run. The German Chancellor insists funds will only go, though, to countries undertaking serious reforms.
I think we've done something important here, and we still remain faithful to our philosophy, a favour for a favour. Thank you.
In the immediate, it means the Eurozone's temporary bailout fund will directly, in 10 days' time, be able to buy Spanish government bonds, a measure viewed as a victory for Spain and Italy.
We pushed on until 4 in the morning, and we have approved measures that I believe are satisfactory in view of stabilising the Eurozone. During the evening, we discussed important issues, and sometimes the tension was high. And things got emotional, especially when it came to football.
The German media also loving those football analogies, Ulrike Kollermann. There were headlines this Friday morning after the semi-final of Euro 2012, giving the scoreline as Monty 2, Merkel 1. Is that really the feeling that in Germany, that this is somehow what's happened in Brussels mirrors what happened on the pitch? They
were taking it as a bargaining chip, saying Monty was saying, like, we can score more if you don't give up. So I think it was seen as a double defeat in Germany. On the European level and on the football match as well.
But was it really seen as a double defeat? We know that, for instance, the German finance minister gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal going into that summit where he said that for the first time he talked about some form of debt sharing down the line, and he paid lip service to the concept of Eurobonds, something that all week long Angela Merkel had said no way. She even at one point said that not as long as I'm alive.
Yeah, but that can mean long term maybe. So it doesn't need to be complete exclusion. And Hollande said the same. It's not an immediate project. It can come after a few years. So, sorry, what was the question?
The question was, is it really a defeat for Germany?
Merkel said it's not a defeat, obviously, she has to sell it, but I think it was very tough. It is clear that Italy and Spain took the summit on hostage, and they didn't want to sign the growth pact, which is ridiculous because it is Italy who needs it most. And Merkel, who doesn't really need it, she needed it for political reasons because there is another vote in the parliament in Germany. So I think it was very tough negotiations, and she had to give in more than she was planning to give in. But it was definitely not a complete defeat.
And here's the strange thing. On his, you mentioned that vote to approve the fiscal pact that was agreed to last, I think it was November or December. On his Twitter account, the opposition SDP's Carsten Schneider taunted the government spokesperson Stefan Siebert, saying Excuse me, please. What conditions here? Italy's got what it wanted. Cash without conditions. It sets a precedent for all the others. In other words, I'm confused here. Maybe you can help me out on this, Tanguy. The German opposition is accusing Angela Merkel, basically, of not acting enough like Angela Merkel.
Yeah, but I think it's all political, all this, you cannot forget the framework of what is happening in Europe. Every European leader has political gains or losses to keep in mind. So I think they are all preparing for the next elections, and we know that in the vast majority of the Germans are supporting Angela Merkel's stance towards Europe, and so in a way the opposition is saying, okay, we are also supporting this kind of strength, even if we disagree on some ways to reach the goal. So, well, we have to see exactly what it means, because there are these important votes in the Bundestag, and there are important fights probably with the Constitutional Court in Germany, and also regarding the Growth Pact and all the new measures. So all this, again, is kind of politics applied to economy.
All right, well, we don't have a rabbit that we can pull out of a hat, but we can welcome at this point Dave Clark of the French news agency AFP, caught in Paris traffic, it seems. How are you, sir?
I'm very well.
All right, thanks for joining us. We're hearing there Tanguy very cautious in his demeanor after this summit, but are we being met, perhaps because it was summit number 19, a little bit too cynical? Was there perhaps this time finally some kind of a breakthrough?
Oh, I loved the smell of bureaucrats bickering in the morning. We become obsessed with these bickering bureaucrats and their ministers. Again, using the phrase that has really become the motto for what's going on here in Europe, it's let's kick the can down the road some more. And that's what we are seeing.
All right, but they've said this time, okay, we can give the money directly to the banks. They have put
until next time. For Europe to grow, it needs more investment. Everyone has said this.
But it also needs to put out its financial fires.
Well, sure. There's a host of things here, but one of the ways, for instance, it goes back to this question of sovereignty. Are we going to have a United States of Europe? Are we going in that direction? The question is, for instance, one of the hundreds, are the French people, willing to forego, for instance, being laid off without going to the Prud'homme? Right now, any businessman who wants to lay someone off here in France
has to go to the ombudsman.
Yeah, a judge basically has to say it's okay. Now you talk.
And it takes years.
And it takes years, and this is stifling. I can tell you for a fact, companies from coming here. Now this is an elemental question. Do you have the right to do this? You add on to this, the French retirement age. You go to Germany, there's issues there. You go to Holland, there's issues there. Everyone over the past 19 summits has really talked around the specifics of creating a United States of Europe. The question for me is not how much money Italy's getting now and whether it's going to the banks. It's how much sovereignty is Italy willing to give up, or France willing to give up, to lead to what's going to happen at the end of the process? That's the question that's not being asked. Let the number crunchers deal with the number. That, to me, is the real political question.
And Dave Clark, can they do that?
Well, it's a question of sequencing. I think the Germans would like everybody to sign up to their form of financial government right away, and then they'll see about pooling the debt. Everyone else wants the money up front before we're willing to cede any kind of sovereignty to the European Central Bank. So it's a question of what order they do things in. I don't think there's any fundamental disagreement that in order for the Eurozone to work better, it has to work as a true single economy with a single central bank, which is the lender of last resort, and with pooled Eurobonds. But the Germans won't give anyone the money to do that until they're sure they can control the budgets of all these other countries.
And getting back to those soccer analogies we were discussing earlier, there were plenty of them across the Alps this Friday morning. mostly, though, in the right-wing press, like Milan Daily Libero, headlining something very rude, which we won't say on air, or in the newspaper run by Silvio Berlusconi's brother, which refers to the former prime minister's remark about the chancellor having a wide posterior. Beyond the tabloidy way of making jokes and doing a bit of Germany bashing, Ulrike Kollermann, we're seeing Silvio Berlusconi the last couple of weeks. We thought his political career was over. He's still around, and he's becoming more and more of a Eurosceptic.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he has a lot of influence in Germany because he might have retired a little bit from the scene, but he still is very influential on media levels, what we've just seen. So I was just in Rome and I saw by accident some of these posters copied on the Greek image with Merkel, and instead of having the cross of the Nazis, they put the Euro sign here. So it was very, very anti-German. I think there is a big risk that Germany becomes more isolated, but they have their reason why they defend their position that much.
And a final point on all of this, as long as we're staying on football, Mario Balotelli becoming the national hero in Italy of Ghanaian origin. Is that also going to have an influence on politics and maybe curb this sort of insular approach of people on the right in Italy?
Oh, I doubt it. I think the Italian football fans will remain racist, as will Ukrainian and Polish football fans, and as many football fans across Europe are. We've managed over the years not to change any social attitudes at all, thanks to all these black players.
All right. Now, at the time at which we're taping the show, there's still a bit of controversy regarding Saturday's swearing in of Egypt's first ever civilian president. Mohamed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood this Friday in Tahrir Square, giving a rousing speech to his supporters. He even symbolically read out the oath of office. This at the gathering place for the revolution for the last 15 months.
I am reassured. I feel safe. I'm not wearing a bulletproof jacket. I'm safe. I feel safe. I fear only God. After God, you are the most important people for me.
Oh boy.
This speech was important, Tanguy Salam, because up to now, most of us hadn't really heard Mohamed Morsi. We'd heard him a little bit on the campaign trail, but this was really his sort of the debutante's ball for him, this speech that he gave.
Yeah, definitely. And we don't know much about Morsi. Actually, those who followed Egypt for a long time, like me, we know a little bit about him, but to the public audience,
he wasn't the first choice candidate. They even called him the spare tire was his nickname.
Yeah, and that was quite true actually, because he was not definitely not the first choice. On the other hand, he has played a role within the Muslim Brotherhood for a long time, so he's kind of used to this political game. But until the campaign, at least, it didn't look like someone, with knowing how to speak to the people. And this is very important in Egypt. You have to know how to talk to the people. You have to convince the people that you will do really something for them.
And it was quite impressive because even though it was a speech that was at times rambling, but nonetheless, he was there in front of this massive crowd, and he probably the biggest crowd he's ever spoken in front of. And he was able to do the job. Will he still be, as critics claim, the man who's taking his orders from the Muslim Brotherhood hierarchy, or will he become his own man now?
Well, this is the way of working in the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, it is a hierarchy, so definitely he will not take the decisions on his own. The problem is not if he will take his decisions from the Muslim Brotherhood or from the Council of Armed Forces, because we know that the militaries want to keep their hand on the power. And so it will be a kind of political deal. If you gave me this, I will give you that. And so we will see how how he will deal with that, and then we will see how he will deal with the rest of the world leaders.
Craig Kapitas?
Never play cards with a man called Doc. Never eat at a place called Mom's. Never bet a woman who has more problems than you. And never trust a country in which its top general calls himself Supreme Commander and likes it. It's not a question of what's going on, of whether convincing the people, it's convincing the army. The most fascinating thing I've seen out of Egypt this week, and granted, I haven't covered Egypt as a beat for, well, not since the long time ago, but we all know the army's really has always been very powerful there for all the reasons we've discussed ad nauseum. But I found this interview or this speech by Hussein Tantawi, I believe. He is the Supreme Commander. It's out of the Mouse That Roared with all the medals. You don't go around calling yourself Supreme Commander and liking it unless you have some power behind you. I think that what's happening in Egypt now is far from being settled. Very suspicious of what's going to happen. They're very suspicious if the president can even last the year. The army is the key here. What is the military going to do? And when you have a guy who's calling himself Supreme Commander, you'd better watch out.
And the fact that Ria Coleman, as we heard in that clip, that he's saying, look, I don't have a bulletproof vest, it's partly a reference to Hosni Mubarak, his predecessor, who never went out without one, and also, I guess you could say, a way of showing that it is a volatile situation.
Yeah, and also another thing which is important in his speech, he was referring to God, and that's the big question. They have to write their constitution, and we don't know yet if religious freedom will be there and to what extent.
He saluted Muslims and Christians in his speech.
He did, but that was a speech. That's not the constitution, and the Christians don't know what place they will have. That's one big issue. But then there are also other problems coming up, like very real problems. If he cuts the subsidies for fuel, for instance, there is a danger of a big uproar in Egypt. There are so many, that's just one detail, but there are so many things coming up that are a real danger. At one point, it's good, it's great that it's him and not the representative of the old regime, but he has enough problems ahead to solve.
The Christian thing means nothing. Ahmadinejad did the same thing in Iran. We have our friends who are the Jews, we have our friends here who are the Christians. Nonsense.
When we come back, we'll be looking at what is also a historic moment this week, the handshake between the Queen and the alleged leader of the IRA. Stay with us. You're watching The World This Week.